Hi, everyone. Welcome to this week's SIG Autoscaling Office Hours SIG meeting. It is Monday, June 9th, 2025. We have a couple of agenda items before we get started. Just a quick reminder that we abide by the CNCF Code of Conduct. So let's follow the golden rule. Please be kind and respectful to one another and welcome all voices. All right. And maybe we can move this node readiness gate topic down to the bottom. I think we'll probably have time. But the first topic for today is pod level resource changes for VPA, HPA, and cluster autoscaler. Do we have?
Yeah, hi. I'm
Hi, the floor is yours. Go ahead. Go for
I'm Dikshita. You can call me Dixie as well. So I work for the SIG community and I've been working on pod level resources, which is already alpha in Kubernetes. I think it started alpha from 1.32. And I'm trying to see if we can do a beta in the next release. And I just looked at some of the code in cluster autoscaler. So we did change the method, which is pod request, to take care of pod level resources feature gate. If it is enabled, it uses some method from the resource helper which takes care of the request being set. Now I wanted to understand what other changes would be needed in VPA, HPA, and maybe if there are any more changes needed in the cluster autoscaler for this feature. I guess in VPA, it makes recommendations today for container level resources, and then something has to change there as well. And then in HPA, also the decisions are made based on the usage of resources per request, and the request is also container level, so that needs to change as well. So yeah, I needed some guidance around this, and yeah, I'll be really thankful.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. I think maybe the best way to approach this just introductorily is to put this into the roadmap at a high level, and then we can try to find some resources. So we are, I think, off the top of my head, is VPA. Is there a 133 equivalent for VPA? I know that the release cycle isn't exactly equivalent to Kubernetes for VPA, but
Yes, we've released VPA 1.4.0, which I think is equivalent of 133.
yeah, okay, great. And would the idea be to release 1.5 in coordination with 134? So
Roughly speaking, I think it's what we do, yeah.
yeah, okay, great. So Dixie, I think maybe if we could, the first step would be to sort of target a release
Mm-hmm.
for each of these three. Maybe that's the reverse order. Maybe you want to scope it out first just to see how much work and how feasible it is to get into a release. Thanks to whoever is taking notes, by the way.
Yeah.
But we'll probably want three separate work streams for that because they are three separate projects, and I would imagine the implications are going to be somewhat distinct for each of those.
Yeah.
The cluster autoscaler, just so you know, the 133 equivalent release is planned for this week. It hasn't yet shipped. So we would be just at the very, very beginning of that release process for 134. So does it sound like, do you have any idea of scope? Does a 2 to 3 month um, timeline in terms of roadmap sound reasonable for
Uh,
integration?
I think so. I'll have to look into other other things related to this. I also had one question. So pod level resources, yeah, I think I'll have to discuss it with the owners. Like pod level resources allows pod level limits to be greater than container level aggregated container level limits, and then that would require some changes in the VPA recommendation algorithm as well. But like I
Yeah.
said, this would need to be discussed with the owners. And when you say release target 1.5, does it usually align with the Kubernetes release, or how much is the difference with respect to the time between the two releases? Because I did see that the latest VPA release that supports in-place pod resize alpha probably went like 2 weeks ago. Yeah, I wanted to understand what's the timeline for these and um
So
okay.
should I answer that quick? I think what we do is we aim to have a matching VPA release to a Kubernetes release.
Okay.
But we don't really promise on time.
Uh-huh.
The 1.4 release was delayed so that we could get the in-place features in before we cut the release, because we knew we wanted that. Oh, sorry. So we match a VPA release to a Kubernetes release. So VPA 1.4 came out, roughly speaking, sometime after Kubernetes 1.33.
Okay. Yeah, that should be okay. I think it gives enough time for discussions as well in that way. So that's absolutely fine. And then you say HPA is completely in sync because the changes would be in the Kubernetes repo itself, right?
Yeah.
That's right. The challenges to HPA are just to actually include the support. So sometimes if there's a lack of resources, its actual functional behaviors will drag behind Kubernetes a little bit.
I
So
see.
we just
Okay.
want to get ahead of that and make sure we have a stakeholder to actually do that work. Can you remind me, is pod level resources beta in 133?
It's alpha in
It's
133.
okay, cool. Is the plan to go beta in 134?
Yeah,
Yep, that makes sense. That's a good, I think, milestone for targeting integrations across these types of components.
I see. So are you saying that there could be some delays in HPA if we don't have a stakeholder and it's okay? Like if that happens in 135, worst case?
I, Guy, you want to say something?
My suspicion is that there would be reluctance to ship it with HPA like behaving in a or misbehaving with it. Um is there a PR already open for like targeting for beta to sort of capture some of the discussion on this? Or
There is a PR, but I haven't captured anything yet. I need to, yeah, I need someone to talk with from the cluster autoscaler team so that they can help me whether I'm on the right track or not. Like I have done some of my research and I have a PR which I'll update probably today. But yeah, I need a POC from cluster autoscaler who can comment on my cap changes.
I have a question.
Just real quick, Adam, and
Yeah.
I'll definitely get to you. Can you reach out to folks on Slack about the CAP ask for cluster autoscaler? We can definitely find someone to review that. Is there a follow-up PR to this CAP that I've got on screen right now, Dixie?
Yeah, it's only drafted right now, so I'll share it in a few minutes on Slack then.
Okay, that sounds great. Sorry, Adam, go ahead.
Yeah, I guess my question is for the pod level resources, is the ask to make sure that there's not like behavior that leads to unexpected or leads to crashes, whatever, or is it to support like for VPA in particular to support container or to support pod level scaling?
I think we could start with, yeah, I think for each component the scope would be different. I think for HPA, like you said, because it goes in coordination with Kubernetes release, uh, the change should be pretty straightforward if I'm thinking correctly. So maybe we could try to aim for it to go in 134. But from VPS perspective, I think the initial ask is to make sure that it works and doesn't crash with pod level resources. But then eventually we might also have to think of the changes in the recommendation algorithm so that it can work with the requirements in pod level resources. But I think that would be a pretty involved change and I'm not expecting it to be quick. And yeah, we can work on it together and land it eventually. So yeah, to cut it short, the ask is that it works initially with pod level resources and then eventually think of an algorithm that works as expected with pod level resources. Does that
Yeah.
make sense?
Yeah. And I guess the general expectation would be that the pod level resource limits would apply regardless of how the containers are scaled.
Pod level resources would apply only if the user has specified initially the pod level resources. If they
Well,
haven't, it should just work as it works today. This is what I was thinking, but like I said, we could discuss it more. So
yeah.
pod level resources today apply uh, in Kubernetes only when user explicitly sets those. So I was assuming that it should behave the same in VPA as well, and VPA should make scaling recommendations only if pod level resources are explicitly set by the users. So it kind of narrows the scope of where it would crash even today. I mean, once pod level goes beta. But yeah, it's just good to have so that it doesn't break things if user starts using the feature.
Yeah. And
Um,
just for auto scaling, I'd say that requires some exploration on our end for what expected behavior is.
for for the initial attempt, so just making sure it doesn't crash, what do we expect to happen if a user enables pod level resources on a VPA that doesn't yet support pod level resources?
Mm,
Because I'm not too sure, but it seems like the user could shoot themselves in the foot.
I think that
And
should be a part of the cap, actually. There should be a back compat story.
right, okay, that's a good point.
okay, yeah. I need to think through it and then I'll add it in the cap.
Dixie, am I
Okay.
showing at a very sort of high level the set of API changes that come with this feature?
Uh-huh.
Great. So I would imagine that these certainly inform the scheduler. So Kube Scheduler is a part of this implementation, right? So as this turns to beta, Kube Scheduler has support for these.
Yes.
Yeah. So I can imagine that there's a way to make this back compat. There would be a behavioral pathology between like HPA and VPA and the scheduler once this goes beta, but I'm not convinced it would crash. I haven't obviously thought about this too much, but I just think that those things need to go into the cap.
Yeah, I think I'll think through it today and tomorrow probably, and once the cap is ready, I'll tag the people to look into it.
Regarding HPA, do you know what work is needed there? Because I can't think of what changes would be needed for HPA.
Yeah, I'm yet to look into the code, but from the overview perspective, I think there must be some decision making happening on the basis of container requests and
Yeah.
the resource utilization. And just
Of
FYI,
course, yeah.
this works only for CPU and memory and not for all the resources. So
Okay.
only that needs to change, and it needs to make sure that the scaling the HPA scaling decision making happens with respect to pod level resources and utilize pod level utilization.
Yeah. So I'd forgotten it looks at a request, but that makes sense. We would need to handle
Yeah.
that. I
Yeah.
imagine that's not going to be a difficult change, though. I think we could
Yeah.
get that
Yeah,
in.
I think so. I think both for HPA and cluster autoscaler overall, it shouldn't be a big change. But with respect to VPA, it's going to be a huge change. I think the interaction with
To be honest, there might be no changes required in cluster autoscaler.
say that again.
I'm not sure that that we can say for sure that cluster autoscaler needs any changes at all.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Cluster autoscaler just responds to pods that the scheduler isn't able to accommodate to pending pods. And so if the scheduler and this new functionality produces the expected outcomes, you know, especially with HPA and VPA, where HPA in particular, like, okay, now we've created more pods because we've run out of resources. Cluster autoscaler doesn't really need to introspect this to figure out all of that. It just, as long as it's importing the updated Kube scheduler libraries, then it can make in its
I see.
simulations the same decisions that Cube Scheduler would make.
I
Does
see.
Carpenter need updating? Because I've never used it, but I think it makes intelligent decisions about the size of the node based on the unschedulable workload, I think.
I think it should be the same
It
story.
should be the same, yeah. It does do those things, Adrian, but again, I think the key is just to get the latest imports of Cube Scheduler that
Okay.
are now going to be pod level resource aware. If you don't,
Okay.
if you have a mismatch
Yeah.
there, and again, this probably needs to go into the KEP, then, for example, if you're running a version of cluster autoscaler on a cluster that's using pod level resources, but the cluster autoscaler doesn't know about that, the cube scheduler implementation that cluster autoscaler is using in its simulation isn't going to produce the same operational outcomes as the actual cube scheduler running on your cluster. And maybe that sounds confusing to folks who don't know a little bit about how cluster autoscaler is. We can describe it more in length somewhere else. Okay, cool. Thank you so much for that, Dixie. Does that seem, and again, thanks for whoever took notes. That's great. Does that seem like we've got a good plan forward, at least next steps?
Yeah, I think so. Thank you for helping.
Okay, Adrian, you're up next.
Yeah, it's a simple one. Unit tests in the autoscaling repo are failing, and it seems to be for an Azure test. It doesn't seem related to code that changed. I had a little look at it, and then I saw it was cluster autoscale in Azure and decided to bring it up here.
Well, why don't you ping me after this and I can look into that?
Cool, will do.
Sounds like an annoying thing that should never happen, but
Yeah,
look
it
into it.
doesn't seem to be a flag because all the pull requests are failing, and it didn't seem related to code change. So I think something else upstream. I had a quick look, couldn't figure it out, and thought, I'll ask you.
Fair.
Cool, thanks.
All
I'll
right,
send
cool.
you a note.
Ajay, are you here? I don't see Ajay here, so we can punt that to next week unless there's someone else.
Probably this was discussed last week. I do see something in the notes.
Yep. Good call out. Let me just go ahead and clean up the document. Okay, great. We've got a little time. Anyone have any ad hoc topics you want to bring up?
Caps for 134.
Caps are 134. Get them in by the 12th, otherwise they're not going in. I can say that much. So the 12th is Thursday.
So the only one that I'm concerned about is it scale to 0? Right. Sorry, I'm busy having a look at it now. Last release, we tried to push it to get ready and decided it needed more work. And since then, the author hasn't been responding. And it feels like we need to do something with that change. Maybe somebody else needs to own it, or we need to back it out. Was it scaled to 0?
Is this AEP? Is this an AP or is this a cap in
This
KK?
is a cap.
Okay. It's scaled to 0 for custom and external metrics. I think is the one you're thinking of, right?
Yeah, it's the one.
Yeah, okay. I'm trying to see when the original author last replied.
Yeah, thanks for tracking that. It doesn't sound super optimistic that would land in this release cycle, but it's good to get clarity before the
No.
deadline.
So the history with this one as well is I think it got put into a release a few releases ago, like 8 releases, and
116, I think, or something. Like it's
116. Wow.
Dims sent that email I think after the last release showing all the caps and their statuses, and it was one of the outliers that has stalled. So how do we push it forward? I'm happy to take over ownership, but I don't know when the right time to get ownership is, or to like I'm not too sure how we unstuck it. Kind of looking at you, Guy, for guidance.
I think we basically need to treat it as an alpha v2 from the discussions we had last time. Like it's definitely not
Yeah.
baked currently. It basically like because it's all the format of the AP is pretty different, etc. Oh, sorry, KEP. So yeah, I think if we're doing it, we need to commit to it as like it's alpha v2. And we need
Oh yeah. I agree with you there. The thing is, the original author hasn't been responding.
yeah.
So what do we do with that?
Like we need to like you say, we need to either pick it up or like back out. This is my view. I'd prefer to
Okay.
pick it up and try it like just with a new owner, and try and move it
Okay.
forward rather than potentially breaking some people that are relying on, admittedly.
I'm happy to take it for 135 because I think we've got to untangle the problems to figure out where we are. I'm happy to try and reach out to the original author and see if they want to pick it up or not before I put my name on it. Are you okay with that?
Yeah, I think that feels reasonable.
Cool. The author also has their email address on their GitHub profile, so I might just email them and ask them if they're keen, because I don't want to snatch it from them if they're
Yeah.
interested. Cool. I'll do that then.
Guy, you seem fairly confident that this is a high value work stream, as there are folks asking for this change.
There's like even internally, like
Yeah.
there's people that would like this functionality. We use the managed Kubernetes offering internally. We can't use alpha stuff, so instead we're having to roll out KDA pretty much only for this, to be quite frank.
Got it.
But may I just say something that KEDA is widely adopted, yeah. So I don't know, maybe having a code that we have a solution for already, maybe it's not a good choice, I think. I mean, KEDA is a well-rated project and widely used. I mean, I'm not familiar with anybody that doesn't use KEDA. So just maybe.
My general feeling is like the code to do this in tree is not massively complicated. I don't think. Yeah, there's all the due diligence we need to do around it, but like I don't think it's actually a massive thing. And if we can provide this functionality and it potentially removes the need for users to deploy an entire extra component onto their clusters, potentially only for this. I don't know. It might not.
Yeah, but basically we were talking about scale to zero. It's with external metrics, right? I mean, you don't scale to zero with CPU or memory.
Yeah.
This is my assumption. And when you use external metrics, you deploy KEDA as a metric server, right?
Yeah.
As a so-called metric server. So you still have to deploy KEDA.
I mean,
You can use
Probably
other
not.
providers.
That's not necessarily true.
Yeah, you can use Prometheus adapter and all of the other stuff, but KEDA is the standard. I mean, I'm okay with this cap, right? But just something to think about before we're trying to.
Yeah, I guess that's something we can discuss on the if we're creating a cap for like redoing the alpha. I guess we can try and find user feedback from people who are actually using KDA versus like people who would just want this as a native piece of functionality.
The tricky thing that we're facing is we use Datadog for external metrics, and we used Datadog before we really looked into KDA, and you can't have multiple external metrics providers. So to now turn off all of our HPAs, swap KDA, integrate it into Datadog, and then turn it on again across multiple clusters, across multiple regions is quite a heavy lift. If I could go back in time, I'd happily put KEDA in place, but unfortunately, that ship has sailed a while ago.
Yeah, Omar, I think you make a good point about we don't need to necessarily compete with alternate autoscalers for functionality, but I also think that we don't want to have a official position that if some alternate functionality or some alternate tool has some bit of functionality that we defer and we like officially recommend, oh, if you need that, you have to use this tool because that's out of the scope. I think we just lean on the user community to tell us what they would like. So if there are folks in Adrian's situation who are kind of just they have to use cluster autoscaler for whatever reason, and they feel like they're doing workarounds in their scale to zero story because cluster autoscaler makes it difficult for them, and we get feedback that they like this, that's good positive input for unlocking a KEP like this.
So just
Yeah, I agree.
checking, going forward, I'm going to try and contact the author, give them about 2 weeks, and then I will stick my name on it and work on the KEP, and then we can chat about it, like the specific details. And I think 2 weeks is reasonable. They also seem semi-active on GitHub, so they're not on vacation or something.
Maybe they used Kata starting with 117.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Okay, I think we're officially at time. Going once, going twice. Any final topics? Thanks for bringing that up, Adrian.
We've got about a month before we need to submit a SIG talk for proposals for KubeCon North America. If anyone has anything, pieces of work, particularly given that we've got a pile of interesting work, I think, been delivered over the last year. Certainly by the time of KubeCon, get in touch with SIG leadership and we'll figure out.
Yeah, let's maybe we can sort of crowdsource this for this KubeCon. I could put together a doc and we can share it in the next few weeks with how does this topic sound, this topic, this topic, are we missing anything?
Sounds good.
One tiny thing, I've read the KEP a week ago. I'll be happy to see your thought on it. I mean, we don't have so much of reviewers, so I'd be happy to address your opinions on this KEP. I shared it in the chat.
Okay, since chat isn't recorded, let's make sure we copy paste that in there. Thank you, Guy.
Thank you. Thank you, Guy.
Go ahead and click through real quick just to promote visibility. So we are talking about cool. So this is a new KEP, Omer?
Yeah.
Okay.
3 weeks ago, yeah.
Do we have sufficient stakeholders in, is it just a SIG Autoscaling?
Yeah,
Because it hits in
SIG
tree, it's gonna potentially get the attention of the big folks. So I want to make sure that that's all sorted out before
touches some
the
of it
deadline.
it touches some of it touch the SIG off.
Yep.
Because we need more permissions to the HPA service account, but I don't think it has something else.
Is SIG Auth aware of it?
Yeah, someone from their team only put it in the, I don't know, in progress dashboard.
Okay, cool. I
think,
can
something
check.
like that.
I can check an async on that.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, for folks wrapping up their Mondays, or for folks starting their Mondays out like myself, Godspeed, everyone.
Thanks.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.